real quick before we get started?
Yeah, the mayor asked me to let everybody know. We all remember Paul Aziz. He's in the hospital, has been for over a week now. His hip has got a real bad infection, and they're still trying to get it under control. And there's a good possibility he'll be transferred to Legacy Emmanuel. So if anybody, he's in room 310 over at Corvallis. If anybody wants to go by and see him, he appreciates visitors. He's got a room with a view too. I mean, I could see Polk County where I parked to go visit him.
All right, thank you. Today, we're going to be talking about 5-year budget projections. I'll turn it over to City Manager Ron.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and City Council. What we have before you today is the city services fee discussion. Kind of give you a little bit of more information on that. So kind of objectives for today would include the structural deficit and the causes of that, what we've done to date as an organization. We'll review the latest 5-year budget projection, talk about the city services fee amount, timing that goes in with that. We'll show you and go over some of the messaging that we've put together. Some of that includes what you... It's on. Some of that includes a website that or a web page that we've made. It's not live, of course. And then we'll review and discuss example ordinances and resolution if council chooses to implement the fee. We'll have time for questions. I would say ask questions all the way through, and then we'll get into next steps and timing as we go through this. So jumping right into it, a little bit of background. We've discussed on multiple occasions that the city is currently facing a structural deficit in the general fund. Structural deficit is where your expenses, your yearly expenses are more so than your yearly revenues. There's multiple reasons for that, and we'll get into that. Based on our latest 5-year projections, we will not balance by fiscal year 26. When I say not balance, we would balance, but we will not be able to have the per policy required reserves on hand, which I think we've shown through several of our other meetings. We've held work sessions on the 20th of March of this year, the 24th of April, and then we discussed this a little bit, actually quite a bit during the budget process this year, about the need for either additional cuts, which we've made, or an alternative revenue source. We also discussed the multiple reasons leading up to why we're running a structural deficit, and I'm going to have Brandon kind of go into what those are. They're up there, measure 55, increased personnel, but just to give you a little bit more, and so that for anybody that's watching has an idea of what has led up to this. So Brandon, if you'd kind of give them a little bit of information on that and the PERS.
Sure. So as part of our discussions previously, property taxes is our biggest revenue source for the general fund. One of the biggest issues is that we are limited in what we can get in property taxes by measures 5 and 50. As a reminder, measure 5 limits all general government tax revenue to $10 per thousand of real market value. And measure 50 was the measure that reset property tax values back to a 1996 level at the time, and then limited any annual increases to 3%. So without any actual property growth in Lebanon, whether that be new housing, new businesses, whatever that may be, we are limited to just that 3% assessed value growth. On the flip side, we are looking at about an annual 8% increase in our overall expenditures. That's personnel, materials and service, any capital needs that we have. All of that stuff goes up about 8% a year. So you can see where that doesn't necessarily jive very well when you have expenses quickly outpacing what you bring in revenue each year. We've hit on the increased personnel costs. Unfortunately, personnel costs across the board are just, they're not going down, right? You've got cost of living adjustments. We all know that inflation has been super high, which has then translated into increases in salaries. Benefit costs rise about anywhere between 6 to 9% a year. And we have PERS certainly to consider, which we'll get to in a second, but all of that compounds kind of this issue of we're not making enough to make ends meet in the long run. Inflation on goods, services, and capital maintenance projects. Ron can probably speak to more of the capital side, but certainly the city is no stranger to inflationary pressures, just like a normal human being out on their own. We suffer the same increases. We don't certainly get, discounts, so to speak, just because we're a government entity. So those costs, those inflationary costs have hurt us over the long run. PERS increases is something that we face on a regular basis, but we have zero control over, quite honestly. We are subject to whatever the state and the PERS board has put in place. We generally see rate increases of anywhere between 20 to 30% every 2 years, which amounts to a significant increase on our bottom line every year. When you have salary increases as well in that, then those PERS costs continue to rise as well. So all of that has hurt us in our ability to make sure that we can provide the same level of service with the existing revenue that we receive. Excuse me. This is kind of an example, a distribution of where folks' property tax dollars go, because I think there's somewhat of a misconception on, the city gets all these property tax dollars. Why is it that we can't make our ends meet? Well, for every dollar that an individual spends on property taxes, we only get 29 cents of that. The rest of it goes to places like Lynn County for their services, the Lebanon Fire District. A big chunk goes off to education expenses. So that'd be the Lebanon School District, LBCC, and the Lynn Benton Lincoln Education Service District. And then there are small districts, the Lebanon Aquatic District and Lynn County 4-H that get slivers of that at the end. So we don't receive all of the property taxes that a house or a business may pay each year. But that 29 cents that we do get has to then be distributed to cover the costs of a municipal court, our planning and building department, the police department, the library, economic development, our senior center, and then certainly we also have the bond payments for the Justice Center and the library built just a little over 20 years ago, I think, basically. So it's that 29 cents doesn't go very far. Go look quick, Happy. Here we go.
Oh, we're almost done.
All right, any questions?
So each year at this point, and we crossed this threshold in 2023, was the first year that we finally spent more than we actually brought in revenue. You all have seen that financial report that was presented at the last council meeting. The general fund spent $108,000 more than it brought in last year. So it's the first year that of this kind of systematic overexpending that we are now dipping into our fund balance, our reserve. The city has a policy that we are supposed to maintain a 17% reserve fund for the general fund each year. The idea behind that is that floats enough money for you to get through the first 4 months of the year before property taxes really starts to kick in, but also gives you kind of a rainy day fund as conditions change economically. Now that we are dipping into that on a very regular basis, as you all know, through our multiple sessions and discussions on this, that reserve fund eventually will hit a spot where we no longer have the reserve and a little bit further out, we get to a spot where we don't have any fund balance. We start to exceed what we actually have in available funds. We can't do that legally, so by the time we got to that point, there would certainly be some additional austerity measures put in place. But for visual sake and to kind of get an idea of where we're going to be, we have on future slides demonstrated where we think the fund will be in its deficit fund balance by then. Based on that current 5-year projection, which we'll see in a minute, we can't sustain what we have. There has to be some sort of revision, and that can be expenditure reductions or that can be new revenues. Ron will talk here in a little bit about some of the work that the city has done as far as expenditure reductions in order to do our part to get things as low as possible. But that also means taking a small sliver of what we can offer to residents on a regular basis, right? There is a certain point at which you can potentially maintain a service, but things aren't going to happen as fast as maybe they used to happen. And I think that all of us have started experiencing some of that as our reductions have gone into place. The general fund revenue shortfall directly impacts programs and services such as the police department, library, senior center, parks, and courts. It also has a small indirect impact on some of our, what we call internal service functions. So finance, admin, which is the city manager's office, human resources, and our IT. That also hits our building fund and our ability to keep our buildings as nice as they currently are. During the 2024-25 fiscal year, we've eliminated 9.75 full-time equivalent positions. So that isn't necessarily directly people as far as that 9.75. It's could be 13 people, but the overall FTE reduction is 9.75. 8 of those are directly impacting the general fund. Did we put a list of those in?
We did not put a list of those.
So some of those positions include reductions in economic development. We've got reductions we kind of redistributed some FTE out of the senior center and over to our Links Transit program. Finance has an FTE that has been reduced. Library has lost some FTE. The engineering division, once they have a retirement coming up, they don't intend to refill that position. So it's kind of a broad swath of positions across the organization that have been eliminated in a bid to reduce expenditures as much as we can on this end without eliminating completely essential services that folks rely on. Now, that doesn't mean that some of those duties aren't being reassigned to other people, right? So that's where the kind of things happen a little bit slower part comes into play. Because somebody, in some cases, is picking up some of those duties in order to maintain them.
Probably 2 of the biggest impacted departments would be your human resources and parks. We eliminated 2 positions out of both of those departments. So now you have 2 full-time park staff rather than the 4 that we had. So that's where your biggest comes from. And then we reduced materials and services by $180,000 as well. So those are the reductions that we've taken to date, and that I feel like that we can still maintain our current level of service without really making some big changes, some big policy changes at that point. So that's, any questions on what we've covered in terms of the background so far? Okay. One of the other things that we're doing as a director team and as a staff, I would say, we're looking at ways to create efficiencies. What do those include? We're looking at ways to save money throughout. I'll give you an example. Solar is one that we're looking into, to cut our power costs. We're looking at, is there ways for departments to do things, with different computer software and things of that nature that could save throughout the organization. So with that, like on the 24th work session, on April 24th, we had that work session, and council had asked staff to come back and show different options for implementing a service fee and operations levy. At the conclusion of that work session, it was determined that the direction from city council was to bring back the more detailed city services fee so that we could close the structural deficit gap. Also, in that conclusion was that the city council did indicate that an operations levy should be looked at a future date. But the priority was fixing the structural deficit at this time. So that's kind of where we're at in the background. Is there anything else that you have questions on or like more information in terms of the background in getting here?
I think we've seen this enough
Fair enough.
for me.
So the next slide is what our current 5-year projection looks like. And Brandon will kind of walk through this, what our assumptions are. And keep in mind, this is the best information that we have today, right? So the idea behind a 5-year budget projection is it's constantly moving, right? So we're going to continuously update this. So the one you see out here at fiscal year 29, as we're moving through, we're going to start getting into fiscal year 30, and we'll just continue to update that. But this is what we have to date, and the best information that we have to date on where we're at in the structural deficit and what our 5-year budget projection looks like. And this, I believe, Brandon, shows with this is doing nothing approach right here, right? If I'm correct.
Correct.
Okay.
So what we're looking at, we'll run through the resources first before we move over to the expenditure side. That top line there, the beginning balance, you're watching that fall over the next several fiscal years until 2029. So you've got five years in here, beginning with this year's budget and the next 4 after that. You're down to 479,000 for your beginning balance. And I can tell you right now, that's not going to be enough to get you through the end of the fiscal year. The property taxes, what we have assumed is in this section is a conservative estimate. So we have our 3% growth allowed on the assessed value side. For 2026 and 27, that's what you have there. You notice a slightly larger increase in 2028. That increase is due to our discussions where the Northwest Urban Renewal District would finish paying off the outstanding debt that it has early by the end of 2027, and we could collapse that urban renewal district, releasing its property tax dollars back out to each of the taxing districts. So we get a large bump there that does help. It's about $350,000 that we get in additional property tax revenue we don't currently get, but it is not kind of your saving grace, certainly. And then that 2029 year is still at 3%. Other taxes includes our lodging tax and any local marijuana taxes that we receive. It is a slow increase each year as costs rise and as we see additional revenue come in from each of those lines. But what I can tell you is things like the marijuana taxes are not going to be a long-term guarantee. Those revenues have started to slow down. We still see some growth in them, especially surrounding, as, like I said, as prices increase. But the market is kind of at its peak, so to speak. There's a lot of product on the market, and so we are starting to kind of see pricing kind of level off. And over time, I think we'll start to see that come back down a little bit. Franchise fees, so we collect those for kind of, we'll call them rent. From utilities that use the city's right-of-way to put up their lines or to bury their pipe infrastructure. That's increasing each year. Licenses and permits, fines, forfeitures, and penalties. Those are internal charges that the city charges for services. Intergovernmental is primarily grant-driven, and then we get some revenue from other cities for various services. So, for example, not in this fund, but we do street sweeping for Brownsville. And so the city gets a little bit of money for that service that we provide to them. Interest earnings. What we have shown in this is as there's 2 things impacting this. You notice that it falls over the next 5 years. You're all familiar with interest rates being extraordinarily high right now. We think certainly that that kind of increase is coming to a swift end. We anticipate a reduction in interest rates from the Fed come September when they meet, and then likely another one in December as their targeted inflation measure has come into kind of where they are hoping for it to be. Additionally, as we spend our fund balance out of this fund, we'll start to see that revenue fall pretty quickly because there's nothing to then earn interest on. So we've got a decrease in revenue here for the interest earnings over time. And miscellaneous earnings are certainly just that stuff that comes in throughout the course of a year that is not a guarantee and is just primarily miscellaneous revenue earned by the departments. All said, you can see that total resources, and this is being driven primarily by the beginning fund balance, but your total resources is almost $17.5 million in 2025. Excuse me, you see that fall to basically 15.8 million by the time you get to 2029. A declining resource amount when expenditures are increased does not help by any means. So. This side of the equation is the expenditures. So salaries and personnel costs are, as Ron mentioned, in here to the best of our knowledge. So they include PERS rates for the 2026 fiscal year. That's the next increase that we will see. And we have those rates, but then the 2028 year when rates increase again is a projected number based on, the best data that we have. Health insurance in here is increasing about that 6% per year. We've had some really good years. We had the last 2 years where there were no increases in health insurance rates, which is great. But then this year, certainly we're looking at 9%, and we've seen as high as 10 before. So we've tried to average that out based on kind of historical trend. Salaries are in here based on existing collective bargaining agreements or a small cost of living adjustment for staff each year. And then that kind of fits all the personnel expenditures. The rest is taxes that is a flat amount, or like Social Security and Medicare is a specific percentage that we certainly don't see changing. But those costs certainly will increase as our overall payroll costs increase, as salaries increase. Materials and service, we have locked in kind of a 1% increase each year. That's not realistic, honestly, if we are going to maintain what we currently do. There isn't in today's market, there's no way in which we get what we need for services and our materials costs at 1% increase a year. So that will mean that we have to start cutting back on what we purchase and ultimately providing to the community because we have a limited amount at which we can spend each year. Capital projects, this isn't really projects for the general fund, but capital here is vehicles, and that's primarily the police department. You have a department that runs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, and they put a lot of miles and wear and tear on those vehicles on a somewhat regular basis. So those vehicles do have to be turned around every once in a while so that we are safely operating and providing the community with that policing resource. The debt service section, as part of this year's budget construction, we discussed essentially there's a debt that the general fund is paying that we are going to pay off in this current year and be done with it. It does save us a little bit of money over the next 5 years. I think that came to about $35,000 for that 5-year span. So that's why you see kind of a larger dump there in the blue section, which is this year's budget, and then nothing for the outlying years. Transfers out are for services rendered by kind of central services for the city. So that includes the city manager's office, finance and payroll, human resources, our building fund, which covers, cleaning of our facilities and repairs that we can make. And IT. I don't know if I said IT. So that's what those interfund transfers out are for. And then pass-throughs, there's a related revenue line to go with those. Appropriated contingency, we always plan for a small kind of cushion each year that can be used in the event that it is necessary. So for example, say payroll costs don't come in where we anticipate. They're a little bit higher because either a collective bargaining agreement changes mid-year or, we planned for one person to be here throughout the year and they chose to retire and they have these significant accrual banks that get cashed out. That's what that money is for. So it's a small contingency that we can reappropriate to a specific line if it's necessary. If not, that money does reside in the general fund and doesn't get spent. All in all, you see, we're at $14.2 million in total expenditures for the current year budget. By the time we get to 2029, we estimate that that's at 16 and a half. If you remember the slide before, that 16 and a half is more than the resources of 15.8, I think it was. Yep, 15.8 million. So we start to spend into a deficit, which we can't do overall. We talked about, so you see that in that ending fund balance line, which that last column there, the 2029, you're finally at a spot where you don't have enough money to spend for that year, $742,000. We talked about the fact that the city has a required reserve of 17%. That's 17% of the annual expenditures. So that working capital line, that second to last from the bottom there, that's the amount that we have to have in reserve per policy in order to make our fiscal year requirements each year. So with that, if you take that working capital amount out, you actually don't have enough money come 2027. So that's a lot of information, certainly. If you have any questions before we move on to the next slide, we could cover anything you need to there. We'll get into, rate structure and stuff, what that might look like, but questions on just the ins and outs here.
No questions?
I think we've chewed this up a few times.
Few times.
Perfect.
Surprises.
Well, then moving on. So moving on to the city services fee. I think we showed this slide at probably one of our work sessions. Basically the methodology that we're proposing to use to develop a city services fee. It's called recommended meter equivalent. And basically it's a methodology. You got to start somewhere, right? So what we did is came up with this as our basically our methodology. We're kind of copying what the city of Albany has done rather than trying to reinvent the wheel on something. And this methodology is used in a lot of other cities too for various things. So basically what it does is you set your residential meter, which is a 5/8 by 3/4, and that becomes your base, right? And then everything above that is all based on you can see the flow rates that you can get through there, and then it's equivalented out over on the last column over there on how you would charge for that. Now, that's not to say that we can't do something different. This just happens to be whatever we do, we want to make sure we have a methodology for charging any kind of a service fee before we move forward with it, rather than just picking something out of the air. So any questions on the methodology piece?
No, but at some point, can we get maybe like examples of what like the 4-inch meter size would be, or like some of the other ones in between?
You can get that right now.
Sweet.
There you go. So this is basically what we've come up with. Many cities throughout Oregon are charging this fee different, other than just your traditional water and sewer and drainage fees. Some of those include public safety, library, parks. Actually, some of them call it city services fee, recreation, street fees, and so on. What we've said is, in order to make the general fund whole, I guess, and make it sustainable throughout the next 5 years, is a start out at $15 on your base fee, i.e. your residential single family. And then you can see how it moves up through on your different sizes and meters. Now, and we'll get to another slide here because that was one of the questions that I had, because it was brought up, is the price on our larger meters. That doesn't mean that the city council can't say, hey, let's lower that rate on, you know, your bigger meters, because we don't think that, for whatever reason, right? Maybe they're not using those services as much. So there is that possibility. We haven't ran any of the numbers to see what that does, but I can tell you there's not a lot of those large meters out there. So my guess is it probably doesn't impact it a whole lot anyway. And I guess to caveat this too, we've shown you numbers where we're getting out there to the nearest dollar, right? There's no way we're even close to that, right? So we're doing, but we can't even project that close. So if we say this here, based on the meters that we've got in town, will generate about $1.6 million. Maybe it's 1.4, maybe it's 1.7, just based on when we get the meters completely set in there. So we can't get it that close, and I don't think we're trying to get it that close. I think we're trying to just get in the ballpark is what we're trying to do without an overcharge. I think that's the goal that we set as staff, was to, let's make sure we get there in a fashion to where we're not overcharging, but yet we think we can meet our requirements down there in the 5-year projection. So,
Can I ask one question?
yes, absolutely.
And you have to put your engineer hat on for this one again. What point in the bigger meters do we either stunt people from coming and want to have our water, or have people say, oh, I'm going someplace else? Or is that even, is that one of the outcomes that could come from this? I'm sure it
Well,
would.
so if you think about a big corporation that has, let's just use a 4-inch meter, because that's the biggest one. That's a
Like an
pretty,
Intech sized place, I
yeah,
would imagine,
that's a pretty big operation, right? To have a 4-inch meter, that's using a lot of water. That would be, you know, an Intech size. I mean, it would be big. This is, again, this is just the basis for it. You know, if you have a 4-inch water meter and you're getting charged for water out of a 4-inch water meter, I imagine your bill is pretty substantial every month. So.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get my head around how much of an impact that's going to be for something like that.
And it is an impact. And there's things, you know, you could look at this and say, hey, when we get down here to our commercial and our business, we're going to cut that by, I don't know, just use a round figure, half. We're going to say at the 2-inch meter, we're going to arbitrarily go at this and say, we're going to cut this in half, rather than go through with the methodology that we've had. We just need to have something, you know, in our ordinance why we did it that way, you know, so that we're charging fair across the board, really is what it boils down to.
I think one thing that's helpful, so for that, to say the 4-inch meter, if a business has that, you're looking at $4,500 a year, right? So $375 a month, $4,500 a year. So every business is different, and whether that makes a sizable impact in their operation or not. And I'm not going to speak either way about any specific place, because every business kind of has to determine that for themselves. But like Ron said, if you're running that much water and that size of a meter, $4,500.
That kind of figures, because it follows, as if my water bill's 150 and I'm paying, it's about 10%, and they're going to be impacted roughly the same way with this methodology. Is that right?
Yeah, that's the
So
idea.
it'd be
yes.
pretty close to that, yeah.
Okay.
The other piece I want to add real fast is, Ron was talking about this $15 base that we have in front of you. It maintains the existing services as we have them today. So our existing budget, our existing FTEs, with those reductions that we've already planned in for this year, this is a no growth scenario here. This is solely maintaining the operation as we have it today. So.
Do we have an idea of percentages on each category up there?
You know, I didn't bring that with me. I had the meters, how many meters we had, but a majority of them are going to be residential meters.
I think you mentioned it last time. There was
Yeah,
only a
I
small
didn't put
amount
that
of
slide
4-inch.
in here. I apologize for that. I think Brandon can pull that up, and we can throw that up on the screen. So this is what you have in front of you to like Brandon said, to basically bring your budget into a sustainable position as we move through the next 5 years.
Something a little obscure. These are people pulling water from the city.
Mhm.
What about those of us that don't pull water from the city?
We'll get to
Because
that.
I've got, like, the Milton Hilton, we're on a well.
Mhm.
So we pay for runoff, impervious surface, that sort of thing.
Yep.
kind of like Walmart with their parking lot or Lowe's. How would that be affected? Or would
So
it?
if you see how we've worded that up there, per dwelling unit, single family. So all your commercial, and we'll get to that as we kind of get into the ordinance. So all your commercial multifamily, i.e. apartment complexes and stuff like that, or your single family, we've said per dwelling unit and went away with the meter size. So everybody that we're going to classify as a developed property within city limits, so they're already paying a storm fee, would then be charged this fee.
Okay, so they would be charged the fee.
Absolutely, yes,
Good.
yes. And that's why we specifically
Not that I
took
want
the
to pay
meter.
it as a landowner, but
Yeah, we specifically took the meter off of that because after that, you're looking at basic, you're looking at commercial and industrial after that.
okay.
So we left those base, so that you do get those charges.
Just for the mayor and for everybody really, that single family residential, so based on our most recent billing, you're looking at probably 84% of our overall billing is for that single family residential. So that's the primary source of revenue here under this proposal.
Okay. Any other questions on the slide on what it looks like? Okay. So a couple of things to note, and I just want to kind of go through them again. It's $15 a month for residential. So basically the drop dead date to close the deficit gap on our calculations here would be July 1, 2025. Past that, we don't generate enough revenue to do that. Does that mean you have to do it July 1, 2025, or can you go sooner? The answer to that question is yes. That's dependent on this body's decision. We are working on determining a rate for low income, excuse me. Right now, in fact, we've been doing a lot of research on this. Julie's done a lot of research. We do not have an actual in ordinance or resolution for either our water or sewer for a low rate. Now we're giving a low rate. We do have it in our storm drainage ordinance. So that's one of the things that's going to be coming back here in the next couple of months is actually pulling all that out of code and put a policy in place and passed by resolution for low income. The other thing I want to note on that is we do a 10% reduction. And I think we're finding what,
30.
in the 30s and 50s?
30 to 50%.
Okay, is what a lot of other cities are doing. So that's one thing that we're gonna bring back and let council kind of chew on a little bit. Do we want to make that low-income assistance more rather than just the 10% that we're doing right now? So that will come back, and it's going to be part of any ordinance that we do, assuming that that's what council wants to do.
We currently have about 61 accounts that are taking advantage of our existing income discount. That's about 1% of our overall billings each month, so it's not a lot.
Is it safe to assume there's no subsidy from the state for people like that? We don't get any help with that?
No, we don't get any help with that.
Shame on them.
One of the other things we've kind of covered already is large meters. Something else to think about if we do develop an ordinance, a final ordinance, is do you want to do something different on large meters? Is there, we can run numbers on that and let you know what impact that has on the overall revenue that we would see. Multi-family complexes, they're going to be charged the same as every single family. So it's going to be by the door. So if you've got a 30-unit apartment complex, it's going to be 30 by the base charge. So it'd be that 30 times 15. And really what this does is, this will balance the budget. This will give us what we need to continue the services that we have today, i.e. today. It does not account for any growth. And You will see year over year that we will have more in fund balance some years than other years. That's due primarily to staff vacancies. I think the police department has added substantially to our overall in fund balance over the last couple of years because of staffing levels, right? So it gets budgeted every year. It doesn't get spent because we've been understaffed or haven't been able to fill vacancies or have people leave throughout the year. So you will see that. Our recommendation on that is one of the things we don't do right now is a lot of one-time expenditures, on big items, roofs, things like that, or capital projects, street projects, whatever, would be to bring any kind of a excess, and I don't want to call it excess because it's not really an excess, it's just savings that we've seen over the year due to primarily staff vacancies, and use those funds for one-time capital expenditures through the budget committee and get authorization to the budget committee to do various projects that we aren't currently doing right now. Rather than living off of our end fund balance on a year-to-year basis and keeping our fingers crossed and hoping that we're going to, make it each year over year. Any other questions on the service fee? Okay. Messaging. We've had a lot of discussion in the office about how we message this. What's the best way to do it? Julie has put together a lot of good stuff. One of the things you'll see is this flyer that's sitting in front of you. Excuse me. Keep in mind, all this is examples. We're just trying to get some feedback on this. The different things. It's got frequently asked questions on the back page. We could add questions. We could take questions off. And I know you haven't seen this until just now, but something to think about as we move forward. What is that going to look like? She has developed a web page. Can you pull that up? Our web page? It's not live, but a web page specifically dedicated to this, a city services fee, where people can go get information. We can set links to, measures 5 and 50. There's a lot of different things we can do there as far as. Well, while she's looking for that, some of the other things we can do are social media. We would push all this out on social media, have a website link to where people can go and get to the information. Obviously, we would have to get our staff up to speed on, what some of this stuff is and make sure that they understand the messaging to the public so that it's all the same message. There's additional things we can do. I'll let Julie go through this real quick with you.
So first, I just want to start with the flyer that Ron mentioned. So on this flyer, we've tried to include just what I think the general public would want to know, which is lots of contact information for city staff and city council. But then I've also included the QR code. And this QR code would actually take you right to this website page. Right now, of course, it's not working because it's a draft and it's not published. But this website page would have all of the information related to the service fee, including, you can see there'll be a page for past presentations and meetings that will have the past agendas, the minutes, the packets, and the videos to all of the meetings that have had any conversations related to the service fee. Above that, it's the Creating a Sustainable General Fund. Erin, if you'll click on that. That page is the page that we've planned to load everything, all of the information that would be related to this service fee. Also, on the bottom, all of the frequently asked questions that are on the back of this flyer will link to the bottom of this page. Without publishing those, I can't actually link them right now, but we do have those ready in a module, and they'll be ready to link to this page.
Okay.
That's really all I have on the website.
But we can put whatever information, get as much information out there as we can. And that's the goal, is to inform the public about what's going on and give them an opportunity to see why this is happening. There's a couple of other things we can do. Town hall meetings have been mentioned. I don't know if that's something that the city council would be interested in doing. I would recommend it, that we go out and call it an explaining tour in each of the wards. And we actually tell people what's happened, why, and go through that process. We're thinking about including a flyer in the utility bills, should council want to move forward with this, a couple months in advance, so that people know that it's coming, that this isn't something new. And then we're looking for other ways to reach out to the public. What is that? Are there ideas from the city council that they'd like to see us do? What's your preference there?
I think town hall meetings are something we'd have to do, just because we're gonna take the heat from this anyway. We might as well, as many ways as we can reach out. I'm gonna say this wrong. We just changed the name of our branch, and no matter how many times we told people, there was still somebody who came and said, I didn't know this was gonna happen. So as many channels as you can get it out there with, you'll reach more people. All right, you'll at least have the ability to say, hey, we came to your neighborhood, we talked to you, and you didn't show up. So I don't necessarily have any other ways, but I like all those ways, and would be, because the whole thing is, for me, and I'm just gonna give my opinion, if we're gonna do this, we need to do it as fast as possible and start generating the income. We don't wanna wait till July 25 if we don't have to. And a balance of that is, we have to get the info out effectively, so it's not a surprise, as quickly as we can, so we can implement it, if that's what we're going to do. Just my opinion.
Everybody else good with town hall meetings?
Yeah, I was wondering, maybe a chamber presentation or something along those lines too, in addition to those, just because they reach more of the business community, and as we've discussed, the water sizes of the meters and stuff, they'll be affected as well. So I'd encourage that. But otherwise, everything up there looks good to me too.
Excuse me.
Okay. We'll reach out to the chamber and see if we can do that, should we move forward, and get some timing down on that. I guess also, all of our meetings that we've discussed this is going to be linked to that website. So all of our work sessions that we've had to date, people can go back and, I guess, see how it was all made, see behind the scenes. I don't want to call it behind the scenes, but there's probably not a lot of people watching this today, but they can at least go back and hear the discussions and how it went. So that'll be on there. So next, let's kind of look at, on there, you've got on your sheet or your table, you've got an example ordinance and example resolution. These are highly draft at this point. We've gone through them a couple of times. One of the things that's missing, that we're thinking will be in there, it's going to be included on your water, sewer, and storm drainage bills. So that's how it'll be billed. It'll be billed out on a monthly basis. We've talked about the low-income discount for those who qualify. And once we get to an ordinance, we need to determine what that percentage is. We would still have CSC do the vetting for that process for us, as long as they're willing. And this would all come back in a policy form. Wouldn't necessarily link to either of these ordinances or any of your utility ordinances right now. It would link to a policy passed by resolution on this council on the low-income piece, so that we're not constantly having to change every utility ordinance or this city services fee. If there's changes that is made to that, you can just change the policy as we go through it. So
Just for the sake of viewers, the CSC is Community Services Consortium.
Yeah.
They're the ones that currently do our kind of income-based analysis for us.
We'd probably do an annual inflation rate adjustment similar to what we do in our utility funds. So we would come in and, let's say we had a really good year, we were able to save some dollars. Maybe we don't do an inflationary that year. A lot of it's going to be what the 5-year projection looks like. So it may not be specific to 1 year. We may look at this. I think the goal here is to look at this in 5-year chunks. Anything beyond that's pretty much impossible to try and gauge. But so you would see an annual inflation. Delinquent accounts, what is in the Albany ordinance, which is be the same for us, would result in a water shut off. Water shut off notice if you're not paying your account. So because I can see a point where maybe somebody pays just their utility bills and, there's the refusal to pay this, and that's really our only teeth in determining that gets paid. What happens is it goes in order of priority, and eventually that would catch up and you would end up with a lock-off notice. So, and then the large meter charge, of course, I brought that up multiple times, but what do we want to do there in those terms? And again, these are just drafts. We've got to do some work to those first, and really what I wanted to bring before you is just to see if you had any other ideas that you wanted to throw in here with this. Take a look at it, see what you think.
All right. I would like to say this, that I agree with Dave that we should probably move forward on this sooner than later. And I feel comfortable saying that because we've done our due diligence. We've looked at our projections. We've done cost-saving measures. We're looking at new ways of doing business to save the taxpayers money. I think we're at that crossroads where it's either we look at reducing services like library, senior centers. I don't think the community of Lebanon has the appetite for that, to be honest with you. I think we'd probably get more heat about that than doing a $15 service fee. But we would learn that at town halls. And I'm a big advocate for town halls, to hear what the people have to say and to get their input. There might be positive input when we go to those. I'm not 100% of that, but you never know. You never know, and it's good for us to be out in the public and talking to them directly. But I don't think Lebanon really has the appetite for eliminating services. And like I said, I agree with Dave on moving on this sooner than later. It's a raw reality of doing budgeting. Doesn't mean it's going to stay like this forever. That's another thing we've talked about multiple occasions, that this isn't a fee that we put in place and it stays there forever. If we can find, other ways to save money and close that gap, then we'd revisit this. So that's my 2 cents. What's everybody else think?
Math-wise for me, and it's not math, it's algebra, because there's a pain point to this for people. If we tell them that they're having a $12 service charge, they're going to be mad. If we tell them they're going to have a $15 service fee, they're going to be mad. If we tell them they're going to have an $18 service fee, they're going to be mad. Where does that escalate to? And I'm not saying, I'm not trying to look for an answer to this because I don't know it. But if somebody gives you an $18 fee, it raises us enough money that we get a little farther ahead. And how many people are going to be that much madder over $18 and $15? And that might sound like I'm minimizing $3, but because every dollar counts. But are we just picking a number because it's even, and you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes total sense.
We picked the number
Well, I know
based on what we needed to
we went through a
close that gap,
process of
yes.
what 12 and up to 20, and we thought, oh, 20 is too much. They're going to get mad. But I don't know the math of if we split between there. If it was 17.50, are people going to be twice as mad, or are they just going to say, yeah, I'm just as mad as I was at $15, and it gets us a little more comfortable.
Yeah, that's
Coming from the car business, I know that sometimes people don't pay attention to those. Yeah.
all I can show you is what it takes to close the structural deficit. Beyond that, that's this body's, that's for you guys to decide if you want to go more than that.
Well, I mean, I like the $15 with the caveat that at some point we go forward and do the levy to open the jail again and go farther, once that is palatable to people, if it ever will be.
Refresh my memory, do we have any service fee at all right now?
We do not, no.
Okay.
No.
Have we ever had?
To my knowledge, no, we never have. We're one of the few cities, I would say, that doesn't have one. If I look, I'll use Albany, and they'll be mad that I did this, but they have a public safety fee. They have their city services fee. I think is it public, or is it city services? And
They have
then,
a city service fee and a levy.
and a levy for public safety, plus they've got a big road, tax or road fee that they have. So they have multiple, Corvallis has multiple. The city of Sweet Home has
Two levies.
yeah, they've got 2 levies. Lebanon does not have an operations levy, nor do we have a services fee. I think we've done very well, but if I look at our staffing levels, and I'm going to attribute that to probably the people that we have here. We're able to do a lot more than some other, at least it appears that we're able to do more with the less people, and we have, and that's kind of why we've been able to avoid this so far, But we're at that crossroads where you're either going to make some big policy decision on reduction in service, which I don't think is going to be very palatable, or you're going to come up with an additional revenue stream, which, again, nobody's going to like. But I think we've done everything we can to this point to really make that a little more palatable for folks.
Does any council person not think that we should do this? I mean, I'm pretty much in agreement, aren't we?
I think we're in agreement.
Just want to make sure I wasn't
Yeah.
overthinking it or missing anybody.
I'm like Dave. I want to make sure that we do this so that we're not just treading water, though. I want to make sure that we're getting ahead of the game. If that means 18 or 20, it's going to be just as painful as 13 or 15. At what point do you pull the Band-Aid?
That's kind of my.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. This is just me. If I'm sitting in your shoes, which I'm not sitting in your shoes, I'm sitting in a different set of shoes. I would probably see how it goes the first year. I would look at this with the numbers that we have and say, all right, what's this look like on our next 5-year projection? Do we need to, rather than just coming out of the gate? Now, that's not to say that you can't come out of the gate and make it higher than what it is, and you want to maybe go the next year, oh, well, we should lower it. But I think when you seesaw it like that a lot, it just kind of, that's just my opinion. It's not a recommendation. We're gonna do what you guys want to do on this, but
Ron, is it our vision that we would bring this back in a resolution every year like we do with the city service?
yes.
And could it just be included with what we charge for other city services?
Now say that to me again.
Well, every year we have a fee schedule.
Yeah.
No,
Adopt?
we thought that this should remain separate from the
And that's
fee
fine.
schedule.
Yes.
So that there's a clear delineation as to what this is for, one, and two, that it doesn't just kind of get washed away.
But it
in
would
that.
be yearly. It wouldn't be,
This would be done very similar to how we do utility rates, and probably be done at the same time we do utility rates. When we go in and we talk about the state of the utilities, and then we would do the same thing, we'd probably just call it state of the city in terms of where our budget's at and what we're projecting and what our recommendation is in terms of, do we do an inflationary? That'd be done yearly.
I'm betting inflation's not going to go down a lot. It's going to still be an issue.
It's not go down. They're going to make you feel that it's good because it's
Just throwing it out
increasing
there.
slower, but because for me, the people, if I'd rather, and this is just my thought on it, if I'm a citizen out there, I'd rather get an $18 hit and then not have it go up every year to make it feel like, is this ever going to end? And I don't know if that's how that would pan out or not, but we've all been out there. I've more recently than some of you as just a citizen, and that's a pain point for people with our water. That, oh, they're always raising that. They're not going to take the time to understand why. It's just going to be a constant battle if every year we put $15 and then next year it's $17 and then pretty soon it's $28. It's going to be a
If you think of it in these terms, so some cities have done, I've talked to a couple that have done a flat service fee with no index. And 2 years later, they're going, we should have indexed it because we're not keeping up with inflation. So you can set it at 18, So let's take 15 and we said we're going to do 3%. Let's just say inflation's 3%. What is it? 15 and change the next year on a 3%. So it's going to take you a long time to grow that, but you're at least keeping up with inflation on a yearly basis. If you have a big year with inflation, then you've captured that big year. If you have a small year, then, you know, maybe things are less, or maybe you've got a whole bunch of vacant positions in the police department again, which we're hoping not, but I mean, it has in the past.
Well, we do not want to make the same mistake as a neighboring city did with not indexing,
Yeah, I think it's,
because their proposal right now is huge.
Yeah.
No, I guess I'm missing maybe the indexing part of it. What's it indexed to?
CPI,
Inflation? Us?
Consumer Price Index.
Which is also what our rates, like
Yes.
our water, storm, and sewer rates are.
Yes.
Thank you.
I got you.
So that's one way to look at it. I mean, at some point, you're going to raise it. If you set it at 18 now, like for round figures, is it a few years before that has to raise? Yeah, probably. Just based on the projections that we have in front of you, yeah. But you also are going to carry more in your general fund, right? For several years that you don't want to get, you know, as long as we're still here and we're monitoring that, but you don't want to get accustomed to this more and then all of a sudden be in the same place that you're in. That's why we came at this with exactly what we needed. If we want to go more than that, you can index it. If you want to go more than that, you guys can make that decision.
Switching topics a little bit, walk me backwards if we're looking at from a January 2025, if it comes into effect on that January bill, what we're looking at for staff to be ready for that? Does that need to happen? Does this resolution and ordinance have to happen at the November meeting? I'm just trying to figure out
So those can,
that timeline wise.
so, and that's one of the things that we do want to talk about is, you know, if we are going to go forward with this, you know, I've heard you guys want to do town hall meetings. I assume are we want to do town hall meetings before or after we adopt an ordinance?
Before would be,
Ideally before
Yeah.
that.
yeah.
That's
So
where the
we
timing part gets tricky.
adopt an ordinance, we could adopt an ordinance, we could have an ordinance ready to go probably at the October meeting to adopt. And you could set the date for that January, July, when it becomes effective.
Okay.
Or you can wait. And
I think if you're wanting to look at having those town halls before, you know, you look at town halls in maybe the October timeframe, because then you're not getting into closer to the holiday season.
Yeah.
You'd start doing those in October, maybe look at a November, your
Adoption.
November council meeting for ordinance and resolution reviews and getting that all situated. On the backside, you know, certainly staff is going to be working on the billing structure, getting our financial system set up, getting bills established and printed so that, you know, this is one of those clear items on the bill, so that it's very transparent. But, you know, certainly I think that means that you're avoiding the holiday season and ensuring that those who do want to participate in these are available and ready.
but if you're wanting to do the town halls after ordinance adoption, we probably need to do it in October.
Yeah,
which-
I don't feel right about doing it after because
No.
No.
that kind of takes the city.
That's kind of why.
That
Why
cuts
bother
their
then?
involvement.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, exactly. Why bother if we're going to
Why,
do it
why bother if
afterwards?
you're gonna pass it and then talk to them about it? No, you do the town halls first.
Yeah.
Give people a chance to chew your butt off a little bit.
Able to explain to them what we're doing.
And why? I explain to people all the time the realities of our budget crisis. You know, going through the last audit, you know, you see it's easy to use, but PERS. You see the percentage of increase on tier 1, tier 2, and then the other program, I can't even remember what it's called, but the other program, it's like 23 for the first two, and then 21% increase. You know, the normal person out there can see the difference when you say 21% increase on this expenditure, and we only can bring in legally 3% in new tax revenues, property tax revenues. I've yet to have really a person walk away from me going, well, that's, that doesn't make sense. They look at that and go, okay, I get it.
Yeah.
It's painful. And, looking at the commercial and industrial fees here, um, I'll be up in those areas on a couple things, but, I have to keep reminding myself that, I'll speak for myself. My number one priority is to make sure the economic viability of the city of Lebanon is intact. Sometimes not everybody wants to hear that, but that's the reality of it. I don't think we have a choice, to be honest with you. Legally, we don't have a choice. We have to fix this problem. And it comes down to two things. And I mentioned it earlier, we can either reduce services and start closing facilities, or we can ask the public for a small service fee. And it is small compared to other cities. You look at neighboring cities, and I'm not going to say their name publicly, but everybody can look it up. Neighboring cities they're way above $15 or $18. Now, they're different communities and they have different requirements, but in the end, they have to fix their deficit. So it's one of these subjects that no one wants to talk about, but it's a requirement of our job. So, did you have anything else, Ron?
Yeah, so what would the council think about starting town hall meetings in September?
Yeah, I think that's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
So if we can start, Julie, maybe you and I can figure out where we can schedule those, do them in each ward and work with each counselor. I assume you want to be at
Yes,
each of
yes.
those?
I was going to say, I don't know that, I mean, I know there's value in holding them in each ward, but it might just be easier to hold it at the same location with different counselors each time. I'm open to that.
Okay,
I think
and-
some of the wards might be harder to find a larger space than others. So
Sure.
if like we use the event center or the library or something like that, that might just be easier for everybody.
Okay.
One last thing on, perhaps I'm in a high center on this, but on communication, I really want to make sure on those larger meters that we're doing advanced communication to those businesses. I don't know who they are, but prior to this obviously coming to us in November. And the other thing is, I don't know, does CSC actually have a brick and mortar building still in Lebanon now, or?
No.
No? I just want to be cognizant of their workload and making sure that they're aware that we're going to be depending on them to kind of vet whatever our low-income / seniors / vulnerable population, whatever that may be, that discount looks like, so.
So back to your large meter, does the council want to drop the large meter charge?
I do not want to drop the large meter charge. I just
Do
want to
you
make sure
wanna-
they're aware
Do you
it's
want to
coming.
reduce it?
I don't.
I don't.
Okay.
But it is a good idea to at least let them know ahead of time, like, hey, this is coming, so they can prepare for it.
Well, our goal would be to send out,
Everybody gets a bill is gonna know.
Well,
They
yeah,
get-
well, didn't you have like flyers going out with bills to
yeah, I think
notify
we'll
and
put
that
them
sort
out
of
in the
thing?
utility bills, and the one thing that we're still trying to work out is the auto pay, how we would do that with the people on auto pay. We'll see if we can get an email list and do it that way.
Mhm.
But we'll find a way to do that. So timing of all this has got to be, so if let's say we got through, sorry, I'm linear. We'll do town halls in September. I assume we would be, and maybe if we're going to do town halls in September, maybe it makes more sense to go through the town hall process, revisit this again in the October meeting, and just see if there's any changes that you want to make based on the input that you've seen from the community. Okay,
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
okay. October, and then plan on ordinance in November. And then from there, implementation. What are your thoughts on implementation?
As
January
far as
1.
timing?
January 1?
January
Respond
1, yeah.
ASAP.
Get 1 January that you
Okay.
No, this is just a scheduling issue for me, and we all have them. My wife's gonna be in the hospital the week of September 16th to that entire week. And I'd really like to go to my town hall meeting whenever it's in my area. So if my ward cannot be during that time, I'd appreciate it.
Okay.
So end of the month?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm good with
Maybe
that.
what I'll do is I'll have Julie send out a email to each of you and just basically see when what your availability is and see where we can schedule town halls.
That would be good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When we can schedule them. And
'Cause,
likely probably just use the library community room, assuming it's open. If not,
Yeah.
we'll come up with another location if it's not open, but we'll come up with a location.
And just based on that time, place, and manner restriction that, or meeting that we had previously, like a year ago now, I would just make sure that that November meeting has a lighter agenda, just based on what we've seen before in terms of public coming to meetings. So,
Input,
yep,
Overflow parking.
sure.
shuttle bus.
Yeah. Okay. What else do you have for questions, comments? Anything? Well, this is faster than we thought.
Well,
Yeah, I
I'm
think
gonna ask a kind of a question, because and this isn't a question, this is, I think, perception-wise. We talk about measures 5 and 50, but those things to the public are still they still cost them.
Mhm.
Somebody's going to complain just as much if their property tax goes up $15 a month as they will so we have to point that out, but there's gonna be some people who that doesn't resonate with. Just because it doesn't to me, to tell you the truth. If somebody raises my property tax, it's money out of my pocket, just as if I get a fee on my water bill.
Yeah, and this doesn't mean that property taxes aren't going to go up, right? This just means that,
I just try to divorce those messages, maybe.
yes, they will. Anything on the ordinance that you want to see different, be looking at that. Again, this is real rough draft. The resolution will have some more language in it too. We just wanted to get something in front of you to start from. So
So section 2 in there will be built out for when we look at this,
section.
as we repeal the discount for low-income seniors.
Oh, yeah. And we'll probably bring that back. Were we thinking October for that? Okay.
Okay.
So we'd bring that policy and enact that policy by resolution, which then would be implemented into this as well.
And then,
Oh, yeah, I guess that's the other piece. So if we're doing town halls, what information do you want to share at the town hall? Obviously.
probably everything off of this. I was just about
Right,
to ask.
so we've
Get-
talked
get it.
about 15, 18, where did we land?
Well, I think at these town halls, you're going to have to be prepared to answer all these questions.
And ones we'll probably never think of.
And so it's going to take some, being prepared before it's your turn. So I was just going to ask if this document can be finalized or, refined to the point where it's a final
Absolutely.
draft.
We can have that done, but are you good with, so if we bring, we put together some information on what that fee will be, have we landed on a dollar value? I
You're looking
mean,
at 15, 18?
I think that's important to know before we go in.
Yeah. I agree with Dave. I mean, 18, I'm not opposed to either one.
You could even put on there 15, 18, and 20. and what
Yeah.
the numbers for each one. Possibilities. Sorry.
And that's kind of what they did when they first brought it to us. You gave us, like 10, 15, 20 as different things that we could look at. We kind of landed by mistake on 15.
Should have broke us even.
Yeah,
I don't know what
but
the
if
math
you
was.
did, I agree with Ken, if you came prepared with a 15, 18, 20, that would be appropriate, so they could see the difference in what can be accomplished with that. Like, at 15, we're maintaining. At 20, we're opening the jail, that kind of thing. What can we do with it?
Yeah, I don't know, we'd get to open the jail.
Yeah, I
yet.
was going to say,
I'm just saying,
I believe that
No,
was just
I
an
mean, I like the
example.
thought process, but I don't,
that way.
my face did a thing right there when you, I was like, oh.
I don't want to disagree with that necessarily, but it feels to some extent like we would like to go to the town hall with a number set. Because the natural tendency of the people who are there mad, they're gonna want the lowest one. And they're gonna miss that might not cover us, and that we're gonna be back here dipping into your,
Yeah, in
the
2
dipping.
years, we're coming back again.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if you.
So
if you
I
sh-
personally am comfortable with $18 and would be fine moving that forward and seeing where that steers us. That's just my opinion.
I'm comfortable with
And
18.
we'll
opinion.
show that, and I would say land on a number, because I'm not sure even how we would frame a discussion around multiple ideas.
I think what would happen is the conversation would then center solely around
Around
that
yeah.
versus the substance behind it. So that,
I
I
agree.
think, yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Settling on a number here doesn't mean you can't change it down the road based on feedback that you receive or whatever, but setting a number here means that we can center the conversation around why are we here? What is
Gains
what is
from
it we're
doing it.
hoping to solve with this, and where are we going?
And if we look at this and, after the first year, it's possible that you could maybe bring back some of our frontline positions that we lost. When I say frontline, I mean, your parks, library, those types of things, that.
Did you have something to add?
I would prefer to keep it as low as possible. I think 15 is, to me personally, it's kind of my max. Like, I know everybody's really kind of hot on the 18 and even higher, but I know Counselor Salvage and I have had conversations previously, and he was even, at that time, even lower than that. So maybe that's just a Ward 3 concern, but 15 is quite a bit. I mean, I don't know. I do our grocery shopping, and $15 is like, that's, I mean,
Bread and some butter.
no, it's a loaf of bread, butter, milk, and juice. Like, it's a lot. So, yeah.
I'd be happy with 15 too.
I was gonna say, I'd like us to at least start at 15 and see where we land in like the next year for budgeting and stuff.
Okay.
If we do need to increase it, or if 15 is gonna work for us for a little while.
But for the sake of having those conversations in public, if we need to go higher, and then as a council, we have those conversations about what that number looks like, and it comes back lower based on whatever, then I'm fine with that too.
I'd
So
rather
I don't know where I
undercommit and
am.
over-deliver myself.
What was
I'd
that?
rather undercommit and over-deliver myself. If
Yep.
somebody tells me I have to pay $18 and I only have to pay 15, I'm happy. If it's the other way around, I'm not.
Yeah, and that's kind of why I'm like, if we would need to go out there and say it's 18, then that's fine, but I know that I'm going to advocate when we come back for still a lower number. So just cards on the table.
I guess we'd be taking their temperature if like I said, if we go out with 18 and we come back and say, hey, we heard you, and it's 15, and I'm not saying we're gonna do that as an exercise. I'm not trying to play games, but we don't want to put a Band-Aid on this. We don't want to keep bleeding it. I'd like to solve the problem so we can move on to the next one.
Sure, and.
And maybe that's the conversation as a council we need to have, is the problem maintaining where we are for the next 5 years, or is it growing in the next 5 years?
Yes.
Because that's what the 15 versus the 20 is.
Yes.
So.
That is. And so with that, I mean, so let me just play a little devil's advocate on the 18. Not that I'm agreeing or disagreeing, but when you walk in and give this information, we're trying to close the gap right now, unless we're trying to, because the numbers are the numbers. We haven't talked about growth. So if we walk in with 18, are we trying to, how do we frame that? What does that look like when we talk to the public about that?
The way I would frame that is if I walked in and said 18 and you go, well, it says, I heard from the work session that it's 15 closes the gap. Yeah, but we have to anticipate for changes in the future. We don't know what the future holds
And
for
as
us.
long as we're good with that, I'd
I'd rather start a little higher. Actually, I advocated for 20, and I know the public's going to listen to this and go, the mayor's crazy. But I advocated for 20, knowing 15 is the stop loss. That's where we kind of fix the problem. Okay, I'm okay with 18 because it's in between, right? It gives us a little cushion for the future. And why we're trying to find these other avenues to go down to have even more cost savings and change how we do things. So I still advocate for 18, but of course, I'm not the only one on the council. You know, it's my way or the highway kind of thing. So if everybody wants to do 15, I'm fine with that. But that's kind of my thought process behind 18, so.
I'm not looking to rock a boat with this.
No,
If
and-
15 gets us by, I'm just trying to present it to, I'm just trying to get success out the other end.
And really, the only thing you can do today is kind of give some guidance. There's
Some-
going to
some
have to be a
consensus.
decision made at some
Yeah.
point with a vote that's been discussion about this. I think this all got started with, what do we want to put in a flyer,
Yes.
right?
So I think what we're hearing, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what we're hearing is frame this, at least for now, for the purpose of community discussions, at that 18 number and see what we pull out of those town halls. Is that what I'm
That's what I'm
hearing
comfortable
from
doing.
the majority?
Sure. It's painful, but
Goes
sure.
around and you know where the
I-
ball's gonna stop
I'm telling-
rolling.
Yeah. Mhm.
Well, and I think 18 does probably leave you some room for probably some growth as we move on down the road. Or maybe you say, hey, you know what, we're not going to grow right now. We're not going to do an inflationary for a few years. We're just going to sit this tight. So, I mean, there's pros and cons to both approaches. We'll know what the right approach was probably 3 years from now.
Well, okay, one more thing on this. So if it's 15 now, and are we going to reopen it every July then for CPI? So then in July, would it be 15, it could be 1557 or something like that, right?
We would come in with a recommendation, just like we would do utilities, but there's been years on the utility funds where we've come in and said, hey, you know, whatever reason, our projections in water this year were 5% above what we projected. And we're not recommending you do anything with the water fund this year. However, wastewater was down 3%. So
we
we're
just did
saying
that.
do a CPI on that.
A measurable
Okay.
change.
Yeah, and then this body can elect whether they want to increase that by the CPI or whether they want to sit tight or whether they want to increase it more. You could look at it in those terms. But it will be a yearly, my thinking on this is it's a yearly thing that's brought before the council, probably the same time that we do the utilities.
I think you're going to get this discussion coming around in that manner, and you're also going to get it in budget committee because, you know, we go through obviously the general fund every year. So, you know, there's certainly two opportunities here to review this and make sure that, you know, what we have in there is a palatable figure.
Okay.
Yeah, so in the meantime, we will put together some town hall meetings. I would encourage you to look at the information, resolution, the flyer that Julie's put together. Give us some feedback on that. If you want to see more or less, let us know on that. And by my schedule, we'll see if we can get town halls done in September. Start looking at October for another, I don't know whether you want to do a work session or you just want to do an update at council for discussion item only, you know, after we've done town halls. What's your preference there? I don't know if I'd
We're
want
talking
a
about
work
October
session.
work session?
If on the first meeting in October, do you want to have a work session to discuss this after town halls have been had? Or do you want to just do it as an update in the council, do just an agenda item for an update?
I'm okay with either of those that work for myself. I don't have a feeling.
I think it's going to be pretty minor discussion points. I mean, they
Yeah.
may be major discussion points, but it won't be all of this information, so.
Strategically, we might not want to limit ourselves to a work session because then it'd only be an hour. If there's more, if it's longer than an hour is all my thought on that.
Okay. All right, we'll put a work session on the first meeting. Because I believe we're going to try and do a work session on the second meeting as well. Solar work session in October, so
So normally on work sessions, do we do public comments?
we do not.
And if we do a work session, do we want to have public comments? Because that was what I thought part of that was people could come and.
That's a good point. Might be better to
Well,
have it in the
well,
meeting where
people,
they can comment.
it wouldn't be a public hearing at that point, but people could comment during the public comment period of the city
That's
council
like at
meeting.
the final, that's in the November meeting at the final step, right?
So the November meeting would where we would bring an ordinance back for consideration. Yep.
After the town halls, we're gonna know exactly what we need to do. So, when it comes to public comments, they'll make sure their voices are heard. I was just thinking, on a work session or just have an update and an agenda. I think this is gonna be, I agree with Michelle. I think this is gonna be a work session type thing, because, we're gonna have to, after the town halls, gather that information and kind of be able to share it without a lot of interruptions, because I know there's going to be interruptions if we did it if we put it on a regular session, yeah. And I'm not saying that because, I want to silence the public or anything. It's just so we can get a refined product that is a good product. Sometimes when you get a lot of interruptions, it's really hard to produce something that's of quality. So, of course, during the public hearing, there's going to be their chance to be heard. There's going to be their chance to be heard during, if they're watching this right now, to be heard during public comments at the next council meeting, which.
No, in October, we're talking about October council meeting.
No, I know. So I just think we need to have it where we can make a nice refined product after we gather the information at the town halls.
Okay, so for the the work session in October, we probably won't bring a lot of materials back. We're going to basically do that as more of a discussion session for what was heard during the town halls. The one thing I would ask is if you do have changes or recommendations on the flyer and the ordinance, that we bring them back at that time, and just talk about them at that point. But we won't put anything together really for that October work session, just kind of go other than what we've heard throughout the town halls.
So when we're talking about these town halls and we're doing it by ward, are the other members of the council going to want to be at those too, whether it's their ward or not? Because at that point, then we would have to notice it as a public meeting. I mean, I know we'd notice it anyways.
Yeah, I hadn't
It's just,
really,
it's interesting to me to know how many people, if all the council's going to want to be at each of the wards, it's a little bit different meeting, so.
I would
That's kind of
show
what
up
I
at
was
the other ones
assuming.
as I was available to.
It's kind of what I was assuming.
okay.
I don't know if that was what you were
I
assuming
don't think
or
any of
not.
us want to face that ourselves if we don't have to.
Yeah, I want to see who goes first. Just kidding.
We'll notice them as potential
Yeah, we
Quorum.
can do that, for sure.
members of the
Thank you.
council.
Yes.
Don't worry, I'll probably speak first at all of them to take the brunt, and then
Love it. Thank you.
Tallest, you get to stand. up
I'm
front.
used to it, so. Yeah.
Well, and I assume at the town halls, myself and Brandon can be there. We can bring, we'll set the flyers and whatnot, and we're more than happy to speak on this as well. So we'll kind of leave that up to you all, how
And
you want to.
Frank.
Yeah, we'll have Frank will be with us.
But I can't
Friends.
emphasize it enough to make sure that when you come to your town hall, that you're prepared. That's my advice. So, because it's going to be a show. So you have to be able to articulate to the public exactly why and what we're fixing, so.
Would it help the council if we develop some talking points for this?
Yes.
Couldn't hurt.
That we'll give you something to articulate. I'll have Kelly help me with some talking points since I can't speak a lot, so.
Thank you, Kelly.
Well, it'd be nice too to capture, obviously it's going to be a lot of verbal, but if we could somehow keep track of the kind of comments that we're receiving and like categorize them in some
Sure.
way, shape or fashion,
Yeah.
that would be really helpful, I think, for that work session where we're going to, look at and discuss kind of the feedback that we received.
So it doesn't
So.
just become emotional.
Yeah.
Whoever was maddest.
Yeah.
We'll get an email out to everybody today, tomorrow, making sure dates that you're available, and we'll start in on it. We'll probably do 3 town halls. And probably, my guess is do them as close to back as we can in terms of, dates, so we don't spread it out too much. So we'll find a week that works for everybody and try and get that piece of it done.
One last question from me. The other cities, are they doing town halls?
You
to
know,
your knowledge?
so I went back and looked at, Albany did not. They held multiple work sessions similar to what we did. I think their city manager went out a little bit and was doing some different things. I don't know how much that garnered. I think your town hall is probably a better, you're gonna get more people, maybe. And this isn't a new subject, right? I just don't think we haven't seen or heard a lot about it, but
We
my
haven't
guess is
got-
we will.
We haven't got to the decision point yet.
No, and,
so.
and that's when it will be interesting, but we'll prepare for that.
Does that conclude your,
I got nothing else if you
I was
guys don't have
I'm
anything
wondering
else.
if we were gonna talk amongst ourselves to put the money together to get her on to a new sign for us.
I mentioned that earlier today.
Get her on a new sign. Is that legal?
Yeah.
We haven't seen a contract yet, so.
Yeah.
When I was smiling earlier, I was going to say we might have to look at the number depending on if he plays hardball or not. So.
So, could be 19.
1950 now, huh? Ooh.
If that concludes your presentation, I thank you, both of you so much. Julie, thank you. Kelly, thank you for coming up with talking points for the future.
Thanks,
Like it
Kelly.
or not.
Is there anything else from council?